on the latest episode of BCC The Other Side. Our recurring winter series, Northern Frights, continues as we take a look at the beautiful blonde Bigfoot of Ontario, Old Yellowtop, and review some snowy Bigfoot videos on an all-new installment of Bryce's Secret Stash. Plus, every week we are recapping each episode of Season 2 of Expedition Bigfoot with our very own Bryce Johnson. To explore the parallel dimension of Bigfoot Collectors Club, head to patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club to subscribe to BCC The Other Side.
It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode. Can you welcome someone back to something that's brand new? I don't know if that really works, but
Sure.
welcome back to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
and our super producer,
Riley Bray.
oh my
There it
gosh,
is.
you guys. There it is.
got a
That's
good
it.
one.
That's the show. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good night.
Go get regressed. We'll see you next week. I'm so excited. We're breaking format a little bit today because we have an experts episode.
Yes.
We have two phenomenal guests on today whose work we've been aware of for a while on the show. A lot of you guys have been hitting us up about the books that we've recommended and the books we've read on the show. We'll be assembling a list, an index somewhere. We're gonna do this. We have a couple help from listeners, but file these two authors and creators in your notes because you're gonna want to check out their work. We just reviewed their book, Where the Footprints End: High Strangeness and the Bigfoot Phenomenon, Volume 1 of 2, Volume 1 Folklore, over on BCC The Other Side. So let's bring him in. Our first guest is a published composer and maintains an active performing and recording schedule as a tuba player based out of Atlanta. First tuba player I think we've had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He has appeared on dozens of programs, including Coast to Coast AM, and is regularly invited to speak at paranormal conferences about his books. He's contributed to Robbie Graham's 2017 essay collection, UFOs, Reframing the Debate, as well as David Weatherly's 2018 collection, Wood Knocks, Volume 3. He's also appeared on the hit History Channel television show, Ancient Aliens, and is a recurring guest on Where Did the Road Go? Our second guest is an author, an illustrator, amazing illustrator, by the way, folk musician living in Pennsylvania. His illustrations have appeared in the pages of various books, magazines, fanzines, and comics, as well as many record and CD covers. Since 1995, this guy has been making music both solo and with his band. Get ready for this. It's awesome. It's an awesome name, Stone Breath.
Yeah.
He's the creator of Strange Familiars, a podcast concerning the paranormal, weird history, folklore, and the occult. He makes regular appearances on the paranormal radio show Where Did the Road Go? And has appeared as a guest on many other podcasts and radio programs, including Coast to Coast AM. Club Scouts of the world, please welcome to the show Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for
lovely
having me.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here. I'm really excited.
Why don't you guys tell us your voice so we know who is speaking here? I think that would help our listeners.
This is Tim.
Great.
And this is Joshua Cutchin. I'm here. Bigfoot is a goblin. We all know
Great.
it.
No, this is Josh.
Bigfoot is a goblin. That might have to be the name of this episode.
Yeah, dude, that's a perfect name. Talk about
So-
kicking things off.
Clearly, just going over the bios here, you guys are kind of like us. You're sort of Renaissance men. You dabble in many different art forms. I just wanted to talk. Let's kick this off by first, how did you guys find each other? And then we'll get into your background a little bit, how you got into this field. Because I can't imagine after reading your book, or at least the first half of volume 1 of Where the Footprints End, that we could have two better guests to really discuss the realm of high strangeness than the two of you.
Yeah.
So how did you guys find each other?
I can go with my meet cute first, Tim.
Yeah, go for it. Okay.
So I remember distinctly, I was trying to get my wristwatch fixed. Some December, I can't remember what Tim's first appearance on the Where Did the Road Go podcast was, but it was some December, and it was crazy Christmas shopping, and I was trying to get my wristwatch fixed, and I looked down at my iPod, and there's some guy who's doing, local legend tripping in Pennsylvania, and I'm like, when you have looked at as much strangeness and Fortean and oddities, you kind of want top shelf bourbon. And I'm looking at this podcast. I'm like, this is mouthwash. Do I really want to listen to this guy? And sure enough, I gave it a chance, and it was Tim doing some of the best damn legend tripping I have ever heard, and just being a real research pit bull. And I think that I wrote you about the entity that was seen at Chickies Rock, Tim, looking like the Pascagoula alien. I think it was the first correspondence that we had.
Oh, wow.
God, I'm already have two questions. I'm already
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, I don't know how we're going to keep this under an hour and a half.
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't even realize that's how I met you. But like, as I'm remembering it, I had listened to you on Where Did the Road Go, and I said, hey, this sounds like this. And then from there, all sort of tumbled out, and we ended up, sharing space on a round table on Where Did the Road Go at some point. And I guess the rest was
history.
History. Unless Tim remembers differently.
No, that's pretty much it. I think I specifically heard you talking on Where Did the Road Go about more paranormal aspects of Bigfoot, specifically the sort of change in scope on Sasquatch Chronicles from the Wes being kind of making fun of the paranormal stuff to sort of accepting it. And I was doing a paranormal show on Strange Familiars, and I reached out to Soraya because I knew Soraya at this point, and I said, hey, can you put me in contact with this Josh guy, because I want to have him on my podcast to talk about weird Bigfoot stuff.
So I have a question, and this is probably exposing myself. I don't think I've heard the phrase legend tripping. What is that exactly?
It's generally, I don't know when it came into popular use, probably post-internet, but people have been doing it, obviously, since the 50s. It was like, let's go to Crybaby Bridge and see what happens there. Or let's go, this house down this road is haunted. Let's go visit this old house. And
okay,
so
I've done this. I just didn't know that's what it was called.
yeah, exactly.
And then what's the Chickies Rock entity? Because anything that looks like the carrot stick Pascagoula aliens, I want to hear more about.
Well, I think this is the first of many schisms that Tim and I had, because I don't think Tim felt that there was a comparison, but wasn't the Chickies Rock entity, if memory serves, Tim, wasn't it described as a ghost that looked like a mummy with knives sticking out of its head?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
and it was seen once in the, I want to say the 40s or the 50s. A woman and her workmates were going. Chickies Rock is a popular park in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, right along the Susquehanna River. And she and her workmates were going there to eat lunch, I believe, on a break from work. They worked nearby, and they saw this entity. And she described it to, somebody was writing a book on Lancaster County ghost stories. Well, years later, there was this kind of ghost mania in the late 60s in Chickies Rock. Somebody reported seeing a ghost up there, and then people were going up every night. They had to have police up there to direct traffic. There were so many people going up just looking for these ghosts. And without any knowledge of this woman, this later, and her encounter, which appeared in a ghost book, many years later, and this is in the 60s, before her account ever appeared anywhere else. This teenager was up there at some point and describes this exact same entity, this giant mummy with knives sticking out of its head.
Whoa!
Wow, that's wild.
Wow.
And so, does that, in your mind, how does that compare to the
head? I'm sorry, I just need to know: were the knives stabbed in its head or coming out of its head like Wolverine's claws?
Never clear. I've tried to get clarification on that. When I drew it for my first book, I put the knives sticking in with the handles out, but who knows? Yeah.
That's pretty metal either way. How in your mind did that compare to the Pascagoula alien abduction? I mean, because that creature sort of had these lobster claws, if I remember.
Yeah, but it had these sort of protrusions that were sticking out. At
That's
I believe
right.
At least 3 points on the head, and they described the skin as kind of being elephantine or like a mummy. So I was like, "Hey, is this a little bit of a connection there?" And Tim said no. So that was our first disagreement.
I have no recollection of this, Josh. None. Like literally zero recollection of this.
I think I have a blog post on my website so I'll have to dig it up and send it to you.
So where did you guys share a common intersection on the world of Bigfoot? I mean, did you guys start talking about that immediately? And where were your philosophies and ideologies on the subject when you first met? And have they changed since writing these books?
Oh, that's a big question. So I was on Where Did the Road Go with Josh, and I was telling some stories about some encounters I had in the woods with what seemed to me, by all accounts, to be like Class B kind of Bigfoot experiences. Something moving, rocks around, bad smell, sounds of wood knocks, and like terrible, frightening fear. Did I say bad smells? And,
yeah.
Bad smells, and really expected to actually see a creature the day this happened. And I'm describing this experience, and I get done and basically said, so that's my Bigfoot experience. And either Josh or Soraya, the host, or both of them, I forget which, said to me, like, well, hold on a minute. If those same things you described, all of that would have happened inside a house, you would have said that's a poltergeist encounter. You would not have said Bigfoot at all. And I describe this as my sort of enlightenment moment because I read these stories about like Zen monks being slapped up beside the head and they reach enlightenment in an instant. And that's what it was like for me. It was like being hit upside the head with a 2x4 because right there I went, oh, they're right. Like I didn't see a creature. I don't know what it was. And it was, now I dipped my toes in the weird Bigfoot stuff from the very beginning. But my general approach, I think, up until that point was it's probably an undiscovered something. But that was really literally a world-changing moment for me when I just realized that when they said it and it rang so true. I just went, oh my goodness. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, they're right. I don't know what it was.
Wow.
And that was sort of opening me up to more strangeness as regards the phenomenon. And I think
sorry, go ahead.
Josh and I just stayed in contact from there. Eventually I asked him to help me write these books, but Josh can take it from his point of view.
So I grew up as, sort of a monster kid, just loving any sort of creature feature. Those were my go-to things. And of all the things that I was interested in, I was mostly interested in Bigfoot in terms of, unexplained phenomena. Because, of course, it's just an undiscovered hominid. It was the easiest and most palatable, I thought. But after a while, in sort of what I like to do with my research is sort of looking at things that, looking at either things that people will talk about in a paragraph of a book, but have never really expanded out to a full-fledged book, or, something that really sort of shakes things up and makes people think about these things sort of an interdisciplinary and interconnected way. So, as time went on, I became a little bit more, much to my own personal chagrin, sympathetic to the idea that Bigfoot might very well not be just an undiscovered ape. And, I think a lot of my work, at least, is sort of always a challenge to myself to sort of put my money where my mouth is, or for me to really, take a look at a topic that I've kind of been uncomfortable with for a long time. And, paranormal, for lack of a better term, Bigfoot has been something that I've always kind of had a little bit of a hard time with. But once you start peeling away at it a little bit, the whole outer shell just sloughs off and you're looking at this, weird wild man archetype that's roaming the woods. So I remember it was in September of 2018. I had just finished my book, Thieves in the Night, on supernatural child abductions. And I was sort of Well, Tim puts it really well, because Tim says that, once you finish a book, you kind of have got this afterglow, but you've kind of got this emptiness at the same time, where you're like, well, what do I do now? I've been, working on this for so long, and now it's out. But I was planning on sort of not writing as much because I had twin boys on the way. But I'm at the beach, and Tim writes me or texts me and says, hey, let's do a book on weird Bigfoot. And from then I signed on, because I was like, yeah, let's just go ahead and do it. I'd never co-authored a book with anyone. And so this was a good opportunity to do that. And, I wouldn't partner up with just anyone, but between Tim's writing style and the way that he is just absolutely a beast when it comes to research, I said, this is someone who I'm, willing to associate with, so to speak. I think the project turned out a little bit different than Tim's original vision, though.
How so?
I think if I would have done it alone, and I'll say from the outset, Josh was right, and Josh was right in the way to approach it. I'm glad it took the format it did in the end. But if I had done it alone, it probably would have been more like an encyclopedia. Like you get these, the encyclopedia of Bigfoot or whatever.
Gotcha.
A is for astral projection, B is for whatever. And I probably would have done it like that. But this way, I think is much more impactful. And Josh was right. I didn't fight him much on it. I think Josh said, look, if we're going to do it, I want to do it like this. And I thought about it for a bit, and I'm like, okay, let's do it like that. And like I said, in the end, he was absolutely right in this approach.
I love the format of the book. For our listeners who haven't checked out, Volume 2 is recently out, and we haven't actually read that yet, but we'll definitely check that out. The book is sort of set up 8 chapters, and the 8 chapters almost read as their own. You could almost read any of those on their own. They obviously feed into one another, but it's almost like 8 essays, on a certain aspect of Bigfoot and high strangeness. And I thought that your guys' writing styles really complemented one another really well. There were a couple times I'd have to flip back and go, okay, who's writing this, Josh or Tim? So I thought it came together really, really great.
Well, we didn't really know how to write a book with someone else either of us. I think about, writing duos that I've had in the past, and there really hasn't been a byline by a specific chapter or anything. They've all sort of melded together. But I think sort of allowing these different topics to sort of nest in our areas of expertise or our areas of passion, as it were, was a really good idea. And I think probably the reason that there seems to be such a good flow in between is because even though, I wrote chapter X and Tim wrote chapter Y, there was a lot of us saying, hey, did you know about this? Hey, have you looked into this? Hey, have you thought about it this way? And that just sort of ended up getting a little bit mushed together. But I thank you. I think it turned out well. It's the only way that I think we could have written it, actually.
Yeah, most definitely. I want to speak to just a couple of things you both said. I mean, first you, Timothy, if I had to distill sort of the one germ of truth that when I'm talking to somebody about this book, I'm like, I explain it like this, I love the idea of the wildness geist, right? And I can totally see why that was an aha moment, because I can tell somebody who doesn't know anything about strange Bigfoot, and I can give them that sort of that primer explanation. You know how a poltergeist in a house is knocking on doors and discarnate voices and sometimes visible specters, and just imagine that outdoors. And then they go, oh, so it's such an easy way. And it's usually those things where you can find the most truth. Like you said, it beats you over the head with a 2x4. And I just loved the idea of that. And then Josh, to speak on what you were saying, I think that drives at the heart of what we love about high strangeness is finding these details that people like to leave out or like to not talk about because they don't sort of fit into how they want to tell the story. And I think, for me personally, and I know Mike as well, it's like that's where the fun stuff is, right? Because I think in exploring those ideas, you're going to get closer to the truth. Just to give an example of what we're talking about, the Ape Canyon thing, the Fred Beck story, and I heard you guys talk about this. So many people don't realize that, Fred Beck was sort of a spiritualist at heart, and he saw a specter and a woman sort of point him away to his gold mine. And so there's so much more side of the story that nobody talks about when they talk about that incident. But Why is it these strange details, often containing paradox, that is going to help us get closer to the truth of what's really taking place in the world?
Well, I suspect that the real value and the real strength in a lot of these unexplained topics lies in its consistency rather than, the veracity of any single account. The fact that you have somebody, like Fred Beck, who's talking about stuff that would have made complete sense to someone in the Theosophical Society in London, 30 or 40 years later, or earlier or whatever, I think is really interesting because it does point to the possibility, or even dare I say probability, that there is some sort of objective external reality to these things. Tim, you got anything to sort of piggyback on that?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about weird washing, which is done so often especially in Bigfoot. There's so many stories where there's weird details and other things happen, and these cryptozoologists are so eager to prove this to, quote unquote mainstream science, that they just, we'll just leave that out. We're not going to talk about UFOs. We're not going to talk about orbs. We're just going to talk about this ape man.
Yeah.
And to me, Ape Canyon was the single best example of that, because this is a story I've heard my entire life. I've been interested in Bigfoot my entire life. I've read all these books. I read, about Ape Canyon in I don't know how many, books about Bigfoot, just sort of, overviews of the phenomenon or whatever. I'd heard the story on I don't know how many radio shows and podcasts, and never until I read Fred Beck's own account, and he was there, did I get any hint of all this weird stuff that was going on there. And it's, to me, it's the single, best example of this weird washing phenomenon, of which there is no shortage of other examples.
I'm trying to remember if we left it out when we covered Ape Canyon on our podcast.
I think you talked about it, Mike. Yeah, you definitely mentioned it. Yeah.
Because I found that in the research. And sometimes, too, I think it's, it just comes down to time. Like, how do I crystallize this, the cliff notes of this story? But, I think that's a great example. I love that term weird washing. The other example that immediately comes to my mind is all the weird shit that happened to Betty and Barney Hill after their alien abduction, all the poltergeist activity they had, and all the poltergeist activity that abductees like Debbie Jordan Cobble, the Copley Woods incident that she experienced, seeing orbs like fly in through the television, like months or even years after her abduction experiences, or seeing this image of a little girl, the specter of a little girl that might have been her alien human hybrid child, showing up.
And that was just post Barney and Betty. She had prophetic and psychic dreams before the abduction ever took place.
Yes,
too.
exactly. I'm skipping in and out of two different abductee stories.
Sure.
But Betty had stuff her whole life. So how much have you guys found in the Bigfoot area that witnesses who have encountered, a Sasquatch or a big hairy monster, whatever you want to call it, have had a predilection for psychic activity in their lives leading up to that?
Oh, I mean, so I'm the local Bigfoot guy. If somebody sees Bigfoot in York County, I'm usually the guy that gets the call. So I talk to a ton of witnesses, and it's talking to these witnesses, like to take the Woman in White chapter in Volume 1 as an example. That was the thing that really convinced me that like, yes, this is a thing, because the number of witnesses I talked to. So I do the normal Bigfoot stuff. I look for prints. I go, how tall was it? Where was it standing? What was the weather like when you saw it? Blah, 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 et cetera. And I'm lucky enough where this is my job. So if somebody sees Bigfoot, in York County, I can be there the next day usually and talk to them. So a lot of this time I'm getting this information fresh, but after they're done talking, I never interrupt the Bigfoot story. Let me get the Bigfoot story. Whenever they're done, one of the questions I ask is, okay, what else weird is going on around here? There's several follow-up questions I ask, but that's one of them. The number of witnesses who tell me, oh, well, my house is also haunted. I have poltergeist activity in my house, or, I also saw this ghostly figure here, or I've seen UFOs is, I mean, if it's not 100%, it's darn close, it's incredible. And that's what really started me, this woman in white thing, the number of witnesses who told me like, oh yeah, I saw a ghost. It was this woman in a white dress who walked up my driveway, whatever it was. It's just been incredible. So it's, I think the consensus in the past was that repeat witnesses barely ever happen. This stuff is odd enough as it is, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of think it's almost the opposite now. It's very unusual for me to run into anybody that has just experienced one thing. And this is borne out on my own podcast as well. The number of witnesses I talk to that, they'll say, hey, I saw Bigfoot, but, during the course of the interview, they say, well, let me tell you these 10 other things that happened to me or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I think we can relate to that, like
Definitely.
Bryce and I have both, I've seen what I would call UFOs. I've seen what I'd call a ghost, and I've seen what I might consider to be an alien gray or something looking like an alien gray.
Yeah.
So, like now there are years, there are decades in between those encounters, but which makes me just worried what's coming down the pipeline in another decade. But can you just elaborate a little bit more on the woman in white thing, just because that's something we haven't really talked on the main show about, which I found fascinating in the book.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here with my usual self-deprecating disclaimer, and Tim knows exactly what it's going to be. But when Tim came to me with this woman in white connection, he goes, have you ever noticed that people who see cryptids sometimes see a woman in white in close proximity, time or the area? And I said, Tim, I don't know what you're talking about, but there is absolutely nothing to this. And flash forward about a year later, and it's the best damn chapter in the book. So Tim, take it away.
Wow.
Well, for me, what got my attention, there was these two folks on Sasquatch Chronicles, these two brothers that were telling their story, and saw a bunch of creatures, et cetera, around their houses, had the typical, around the house experience where they're climbing on their roof and knocking on their walls and et cetera, et cetera. Wes, the host, some months later does an update, maybe a month or two later. And he says, I talked to these guys again, and they told me all this weird stuff, including that they're seeing this old woman walk around their neighborhood, this very hag-like woman who wears white, and she has these shoes that are too big for her feet, and tells this whole very, very strange story as regards to this other entity, this woman in white that they're seeing, who they assumed at first was just like a homeless woman or something. Very, very interesting to me, these sort of other things. And then I was on like the forum, I think the Sasquatch Chronicles forum, and a bunch of other people were on there saying, you know what? I saw this weird woman wearing white, and then I drove down the road and saw Bigfoot. And people started chiming in with these other encounters. So I follow this kind of stuff in the back of my head. I've like, nerd memory for this stuff. I'm like, this is of use at some point. I'll put this away. And then again, I started, local witnesses started telling me about it. There's a fellow who saw 2 Bigfoot on his property, and I went to see him. This is one of the ones where I got there within days of him seeing it. Probably, I think either the next day or 2 days following, and did all the normal stuff. And I mean, this is so difficult to talk about the paranormal in general. I always tell people it's a spider web. It's not linear. It's not just one line. So when you talk about one thing, you really have to talk about 10 other things. This was right in the middle of another strange group of events that happened, where I started finding skulls on 80%, if not more, of the Bigfoot investigations I went on. Nice, clean skulls, most often deer skull, but other...
Okay, I was gonna say human.
No,
So casually, yeah.
not yet. But when that day comes, who knows what happens?
Yeah,
but
we got a problem.
But this is one of the places where I found a perfectly clear deer skull. When the guy told me the creatures were standing across a pond on his property, I went over there. I'm holding up my walking stick. How high were they? All this stuff, and he told me exactly where they were standing. He wouldn't come across the pond. He was standing over by his house where he saw him. He didn't want to go over there. But anyway, when we were done all this, I looked down. There's a perfectly clean deer skull at my feet, right where the creatures were standing. in any case, I talked to him, and he starts telling me, done the Bigfoot stuff. Okay, what else is weird here? He starts telling me about all this ghost activity and poltergeist activity he's having around his house and orbs, and starts showing me some really, really interesting pictures of ghosts that he took, some of which he said there were biker ghosts around his place. That's how he described them.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, he showed me the pictures, and to me, they look like Bigfoot. They didn't look like bikers at all. He's calling them bikers because they're big, hairy things, and he's saying that the big eyes were sunglasses. Well, I'm seeing just big old Sasquatch eyes.
Now I'm seeing Bigfoot in like leather chaps and a bandana and Oakleys, and it's going to be hard to get that image out of my head.
Just firing up his hog and hitting the open road.
He'd definitely be one of the baddest guys in the gang. But no, they're like very kind of smoky, ghosty, ephemeral ghost-like figures, but they look like Bigfoot faces to me. These things that he's calling bikers. But anyway, he says, well, I have this other picture of this ghost I took in the mirror, and he shows me, and it's a woman in a white dress, plain as can be. Some of these other ones were very kind of ephemeral and smoky, and your typical kind of ghost shots. This was a very clear shot of a woman in a white dress. And I went, wow. Like, so I didn't ask about women in white, and I try not to ask outright about it. Other witnesses, like I said, the one guy saw, he had all these Bigfoot type accounts going on around his house, saw a spirit in white walk up his driveway. I met another witness in Michoud State Forest in Pennsylvania, who less than a mile away from his encounter, he took me to a place called Pond Bank, and Pond Bank has this legend called the White Lady of Pond Bank, who supposedly drowned her child in the pond. The town is named after the actual pond there. And this was, again, less than a mile away, probably 3/4 of a mile away from his very, very intense encounter he had on the mountain there. So I started thinking, well, this is a thing. This is I'm not making this up at this point. This is too much. And started doing research for the book, and I'm finding little bits here and there, and I'm not really making the connection with the wild man necessarily. So I just started looking up these women in white apparitions, and there's some very famous ones in Austria. The royal families would see these women in white figures, and they took them as signs of impending death, kind of like a banshee. So
right.
If a family saw this woman in white, like somebody in the royal family was going to die. And they named one of them. They said her name was Ursula, which happens to be my daughter's name, by the way. But they said that this was connected to the medieval form of Perkta, which was this
we
other.
just talked about that,
Yeah, we just covered Perkta on. I got to say, there was like a lot of like reading your book. I was like, oh my god, we are talking about all of this stuff right now on the podcast. There's been a lot, or on our Patreon. There's a lot of like synchronicities. Yeah, so we just talked about. We did a whole episode on Perkta on the other side.
Yeah, so Perkta is this woman in white. She can appear as an old hag or a young woman. You probably went over all this stuff. But she has this retinue that follows her around, and is composed of two different things. One is the Heimchen, which were the souls of the dead children that she led off into the woods, and those took the form of like will-o'-the-wisp lights, like orbs. Wow. And the other part of her retinue was called the Perkten, and these were wild men. This was a group of hairy wild men,
kind of Krampus style.
Yeah,
beastie guys.
Yep, and that opened it up for me. It was from that point. I just went, yep, this is a thing. And then I started finding all of these different folkloric wild men all over the world. And they're often, they'll say their wife or their counterpart or their helper is this woman in white. There's the apple tree man in England is this sort of a wild man of the orchard. And he has an old woman in white that helps him guard the orchard. There's the Sasabansum, I think, is in Apollonia. And that he was called the friend of witches, and he had his counterpart was this white ghostly kind of figure. The Russian Leishi, I think it's called. His counterpart, he's a wild man of the woods. His counterpart's this woman in white. So it starts appearing everywhere. I haven't found one in Asia yet, to my knowledge. But
this is reminiscent of reading the book, reference after reference. I mean, obviously, you guys know this stuff so well and have done your homework. That's amazing. I mean, it got just going through the bibliography of this book is so incredible too. It made me want to, have you guys send me a picture of your bookshelves just to see what we're looking at. How much of that takes place into your I mean, where do you guys get most of your stuff? I know what I loved about it too is like you guys pulled from podcasts and radio shows, and it really made for a diverse and inclusive bibliography. But can you guys tell me a little bit about? Well, actually, before I ask that question, this is totally switching gears. Josh,
I'm so excited to see where this goes. Bryce.
Oh yeah, well, we can pick back up on it. I wanted to ask Joshua Cutchin a question before I forget it. And this kind of has to do with gift offering and the Fae. And we were sort of joking about last time on the show if Michael could, left some offering out on the balcony of his apartment, what might come by. And can you talk a little bit about gift offering between and the similarities between Bigfoot and Fae and maybe even speculate what would happen if we left an offering in a city environment? Would we get an alien? Would we get a Bigfoot? Or how does that work? That's a big fucking question.
Wow, you're all over the map today, Bryce.
I got to get it in my hour now. There's so much rattling in my mind.
Well, the answer is yes. All the above. No, I am struck by the number of accounts. The Fairy Investigation Society has been kept alive by a scholar friend of mine, and every several years he puts together a fairy census, and you can actually look up the fairy census. I think 2014 was the last one. He's getting ready to release a new one. But it's accounts from people in the current day and age, and I'm always struck whenever I look through it by the number of people who see a fairy in a garden in a metropolitan area. It's just the tiniest little sliver of land. I think you mentioned the quote last time from former Sorbonne historian of medieval history, Claude Lécouteau, who described the forest as sort of a conservatory of paganism. And it really does seem like, literally, if you've got, a 3x3 patch of grass, there can be some sort of elemental spirit or nature spirit of genus loci there. Sometimes you'll see in documentaries of, especially in, I'm thinking Scandinavia, where they'll actually, they'll divert an entire road project around a fairy tree or a fairy boulder or something, and the metropolis rather will build up around it. And
wow.
It's still standing there, and nobody, everybody has a real respect for it. That's especially common in Iceland. But as far as what you get or what to expect, the headspace that I'm in right now is having a really difficult time differentiating fairies and what we call extraterrestrials, and honestly, the dead and spirits and all these things.
That's so funny you mentioned that, Josh, because, our listeners know this well. I won't go into too much detail, but what I considered to resemble an alien gray that was looking at my window in the middle of the night and woke myself up, and my dog, who saw it and started barking, it was standing. I live here in Hollywood, and we, it's the Hollywood Hills, so there's some greenery around, but it was literally standing in like a 3x3 patch of earth. That's like the only little bit of earth I have next to my apartment. So I hadn't thought about that before, but I did definitely have this idea, and the boys know this, and our listeners know. My gut has always told me, I don't feel like I saw an alien. I feel like I saw something that was more akin to like a leprechaun, like something that like was passing through, that is sort of terrestrial in a way, but I wasn't supposed to see it, and when it became aware of me, it ran off, it vanished basically.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I can't, I'm at the point, especially with the fairy alien thing, that I think that they're both describing the exact same phenomena. They're just approaching it from different cultural perspectives. and I have receipts for that. So if anybody wants to come after me for that, I can defend that position. But it's interesting. You look at leaving out offerings for Santa Claus, leaving out offerings for, the ancestral dead, leaving out offerings for the wild hunt, the host of the spectral army that flies through the sky with Odin at the front of it, leaving out full meals for Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus at Christmas.
As well. You got to leave porridge out for Perkta.
Yeah, so it's I think it really is all sort of describing the same phenomena as far as what would happen. I'm not going to give too much away because I don't want to steal Saraya's thunder, but I have in an upcoming episode of Where Did the Road Go, a description with, lo and behold, something actually happened to me. It sounds like it might have been a little bit of poltergeisty kind of house spirit phenomena that after being told in a dream to offer black licorice, Tim's like, what? I haven't heard about this yet.
Oh, wow.
After being told in a dream to put out an offering of black licorice, it completely stopped.
Wow.
So I think there's a sense of supplication for these things. As far as what actually happens to the food, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's like, I put out porridge, and when I woke up the next morning, the porridge was all drunk. Or it doesn't really work that way. Doesn't work that way in magical practice. Doesn't work that way when making offerings. If you have an ancestor altar or something, doesn't work that way either. But the one thing that everybody agrees on is that you toss it out. You take it back to Earth, or find some other way to sort of naturally dispose of it. The last thing you want to do is to eat it. There are tales from Ireland of leaving out milk for the fairy folk, or in Cornwall leaving out milk and bread for the pixies, and a cat coming along the next day and drinking it, and the cat getting sick. So the general idea is that there's some sort of metaphysical essence that's in the food.
Dads,
taken out.
This is a warning. This is a warning to dads across the world that leave that plate of Santa cookies alone.
Well, and of course, and I'm completely sympathetic to the skeptical interpretation that, like, well, that's really convenient. Nothing happened to it, so it's the essence of the food.
I guess I fuck up every Christmas. I'm always eating the cookies and drinking the milk. I'm like, shit.
No, that's for Santa.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I would add to what Josh said. Just like, to me, gifting is such an efficient way to interact with the other, whatever it may be, that I wouldn't put it on my balcony. I'd go somewhere else and do it.
Wow. Don't bring that shit home. That's interesting.
Yeah, so Tim had an interesting little interaction with was a little bottle of wine and a stump, right, Tim?
Yeah, it's part of a huge story. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that in the second half of the show. We do need to take a quick break, but before we do that, I want to ask you guys. You both mentioned you were monster boys. You were into Bigfoot growing up. When was the moment where you guys went from being casual fans of these stories into like, oh, now it's my job? Do you remember the moment that you transitioned into that point?
Josh?
Well, for me, I mean, it was, so I wrote my first book, A Trojan Feast, during the summer while having a desk job at the University of Georgia. But it was the sort of thing that I realized pretty quickly after leaving that job and applying for other jobs, that I was getting through the job application process, and it was getting to a certain point where they're like, hey, maybe we should Google this guy. And they start seeing that my name's attached to all this crazy shit. So, you kind of have a moment there where you're like, well, I'm kind of, sullied by this already. I might as well double down on it. So I guess so I guess sometime around 2015 or so. But thankfully, I'm able to still freelance as a musician and teach lessons and that sort of thing. It's interesting. The UFO folks are like, "What's the tuba about?" And all my musician friends are like, "What's this UFO shit about?"
Right.
I'm always the most interesting person at parties, guys.
I'm sure Riley can relate to that.
Yeah, definitely. You just got to start leaning into it at some point.
How about you, Timothy? When did it crystallize for you that this stuff is more than just an interest?
So my first book it started out, it was going to be sort of a magazine article. It wasn't going to be a book. And as I'm getting into it, at some point, I'm like, this is a book. This is too much for an article. And probably right around then when I realized, like, okay, I'm going to make a run at this. And thankfully, things have worked out well in that department. So yeah, I guess at that point I was like, so now it's my job.
I just have a follow-up question, and it's, I know this stuff is important to us, but why is it important for everyone else too? And I think we can consider you guys artists. You're both musicians, incredible writers and illustrators, but what role does the artist play in sort of revealing the liminal for everyone else?
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm a big proponent of the Jungian idea that people don't have ideas have people. And I think if you really embark on any sort of a big project, even something that's writing a speculative nonfiction book, you're going to find that you are pushed around into creating more than you're actually creating yourself. Wow. It's just going to be like, this is just where this project goes. And I think that's, for a lot of people, possibly a toehold into deconstructing, scientific physicalism, scientific materialism, which I am a long-standing critic of. And I think that if people can learn to adopt other philosophies besides that, it actually might lead to a little bit more prosperity in terms of personal relationships than we have right now in the world. So that's sort of the giant, 10,000 foot view picture of why I do a lot of this.
Yeah. How about you, Timothy? Why is the strange important?
This is tied into our lives. Josh and I both do a lot of comparative folklore. I think it's one of the reasons we work so well together. We both love folklore from all over the world, and we like finding the commonalities in these different things. And, these, in my mind, these were our ancestors telling us how they relate to the world in all these folk stories. Now, some of them are very, very mundane. This plan will kill you. That plan will heal you, But as regards this weird stuff, it's kind of our ancestors telling us like, hey, we saw this weird stuff. This is how we dealt with it. These are the rules, so to speak. This is what we found has worked and what hasn't. And in dealing with these things. So it's part of the human experience. And my entire life as an artist, I've always done, quote unquote, supernatural art, and my music has always been about that in one form or another. So it's kind of where I've lived myself. It's just my interest, but it's part of humanity. It's the same, some people write love songs and those are extremely important. But my part in this world, I think, is kind of messing with this supernatural, this weirdo paranormal stuff, and seeing how it fits in with our lives. So I think it's part of the human experience. Short answer.
Wow.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more High Strangeness and Bigfoot with Josh and Tim.
In the night, but yeah, people in the night too. And
I sought the dark, and the dark sought me.
But it was weird. I was like, I felt very comfortable. Like, yeah, and it's just like you seek out these like really dark, like normally these dark corners in my backyard. I'm like, that's a little creepy, but it was like during those few days, I was like, I would go hang out in those corners and like maybe smoke a bowl or something. But it was fucking weird, man.
Very brief goth phase.
Yeah. That was probably just a goth phase. You're right.
Well, now, Bryce, welcome back, listeners. We're talking to Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner about the darkness and being scared of the dark, which we were chatting during the break. But Bryce, now you're out in the woods. You're doing this for Expedition Bigfoot. And so, and it seems, only 2 episodes in that you're out there with something. So what's your relationship to the darkness and the woods now?
Yeah, no, totally. So I was just telling the fellas about, a few years back, I was slammed into what I can only describe by a mystical state. And I sought out the darkness, right? Like I really liked being in dark corners and just being in the dark. But yeah, there's a relation. And so now, and I was always sort of afraid of the dark too. But now it's like, I really, there's a relationship that's been able to fuse together, right? Like, being a person who's not seeking out the dark, but then knowing that, like, if you want to find sort of strange things, then the dark has to be a part of it,
Bryce, you've never mentioned this on the show. Is this that thing that you didn't want to tell us about a couple years ago?
Sort of, and then, but not really, God, right? Like, I've got a few little things, but yeah, that was one of them, right? It was a really strange.
Wow, guys, BCC listeners, this is a long standing secret plot thread mystery to the show.
The Tales of Shadow, Bryce.
Yeah, it really was. It was really like experiencing a shadow world, right? And it was just a place where where information came faster,
Interesting.
And it felt like verifiable. It felt like verifiable information. You're like, man, what I'm experiencing right now feels true.
Well, I don't want to ignore our guests here, and please, I encourage them to ask questions. But what information were you getting as Shadow Bryce? Like, what were you experiencing?
Oh my gosh, just like, for lack of a better term, just like secrets of the universe. You know what I mean? You'd be like, you would feel like you had this relationship with chaos, right? As opposed to order. And you got to see sort of this really divineness about chaos and the darkness and the dark recesses and the unknown, it's like, it was like a real place to explore ideas about, just strange shit, like about who we are and what's real. It was a weird time.
Is this why you stopped smoking pot?
My wife made me stop smoking pot. But
is it because you were facing the chaos behind your children's playhouse in the backyard?
It probably didn't help, but yeah, very, very crazy, very crazy.
I mean, he's an endless well. He's a bottomless well of fascination, Bryce Johnson. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more about this in 2021. Tim, you mentioned, or I think Josh, you actually mentioned the story about Tim offering a bottle of wine on a tree stump to, I'm going to assume Bigfoot. What's this story?
Well, I didn't know what it was at this point. This all started out with what I mentioned previously. It's in a local park, which is known locally as Hex Hollow because there was a very famous murder that occurred there that they called a hex murder. Had to do with supposed witchcraft. It wasn't really, but supposed witchcraft and stuff.
No, it was just an abusive man. He's just an evil man, an evil murderer. It has nothing to do with witchcraft. More
of a faith healer. It's a local sort of faith healing practice. It doesn't involve like sympathetic magic and so forth. But the guy wasn't a witch. But in any case, this place is called Hex Hollow, and I had originally. Boy, this is a spider web. So sorry if it doesn't. It's a little hard to tell linearly.
Yeah, sorry I opened Pandora's box on this.
I love that analogy, by the way, though, the spider web analogy for the paranormal. It's such a good way of.
Well, I mean, there's no other way because you try to tell it linearly, and you're like, well, but wait, this relates to something that happened like over here, and 2 months previously, but I didn't realize it until 3 months later, and then I put it all together. But I found this cairn, this stack of white quartz, and rearranged it. And over the course of the better part of a year, started this. My wife called it the game of chess, where every time I would go to this, and this is the closest park to my house. It's not wilderness. It's a rural area, but it's not. Wilderness is untouched land. This is, people are here. So it was odd to me. And every time I would come and I started going like 2, sometimes 3 times a week, it would be changed and I would change it. It'd be changed when I saw it again. So this, takes place. And then I had that scary event I was talking about where I had heard wood knocks, what I assume was wood knocks. And then I was walking up to this area and then like a whole murder of crows went nuts and flew over my head and went up there on this particular day, heard another sound that sounded like, I heard a rock clack, and then I heard a wood knock sound when I got up to the area. It sounded from the opposite direction, what I thought was a wood knock. Then I was hit by this smell, this horrible smell. Then this fear took over my body, this intense fear. And I wanted to run. I wanted to run so bad, and I couldn't because my knees were locked up. The only thing I could do was lean on my walking stick. And it was at that point I thought, well, here comes your sighting. You know, I've read enough Bigfoot accounts and heard enough where, like, you know, you're about to see something, buddy. Prepare yourself. And then I heard the sound like 2 or 3 little clicks, like sounded like little gears, like 2 little gears clicking together, like click, 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 from the direction where I heard that wood knock. And all of the fear went away, the smell went away, everything went away all at once. And I was able to sort of restock the rocks and go about my business. I found on the way out a trackway of what I call maybe footprints. They certainly looked like footprints. There was a very light coating of snow. And these came off of a game trail across the main trail and then up into a cornfield where I couldn't follow them anymore because the ground was too broken up. But they certainly looked like footprints, but I can't say. They weren't super distinct. In any case, kept doing this sort of rebuilding the cairn thing until one day I cut myself on the quartz. It's really sharp quartz rock. I cut myself on it. I bled all over the rocks, and I thought, oh boy, this is gonna be awesome. Like it's gonna go nuts here now. And it never changed again. That was the end of it. Wow. The blood ended it. There was no more after that. So maybe, I don't know, another month or so goes by, and I'm in a different part of the same park, and I'm off trail. So now this other thing was at a trailhead. It was easy to get to. I don't think it was people in the end because of all the other strangeness that accompanied it. But if you want to say it was people, maybe it was people. But this is I found a stack of rocks, of boulders really, in the crotch of a tree, off trail. This is completely off trail. You can't see it from the trail, so you'd have to know it was there. And wow, this is really, really interesting. So I thought, I'm going to start adding to this. So I added rocks to that.
Oh, wow.
Every time I come back, they're cleaned off, completely cleaned off.
The rocks you put there.
Whatever rocks I put there, it's cleaned off there's like a stack of 3 rocks in the crotch of this tree. Oh, man. So no matter what I do to it, it's completely cleaned off. And this is an aside. This comes much later, but I took a friend of mine there. He's like super strong guy, like ex-military, just a beast of a human being. And I'm telling him about it, and he's like, well, we'll see. And he picks up boulders. He puts up, like, I couldn't even lift these things if I tried. I'm a big guy. I'm over 6 foot tall and over 200 pounds. I'm a large fella. And there's no way I could put these things up. This guy's a beast. And he puts these, what I call boulders, on top of these. Next time I went, cleared off back to the original 3 rocks. So had to be somebody at least as strong as him clearing them off if it's a person. But in any case, I started leaving food offerings there, which, probably shouldn't have done, but I did. And they often be gone, and you go, well, squirrel or raccoon or whatever, who knows what's going on there. And then I got the bright idea to leave alcohol. And I had this little glass bottle with a little cork in it, and I filled it with wine. And there's a hole down below where these rocks are stacked in the crotch of this tree that, someone with a smaller hand than mine could fit their hand in there. I couldn't. So I dropped it in there, and I asked out loud. And I'd asked out loud for other things in this park. After reading Mike Clelland's book, The Messengers, about owls, one day I read in his book about this woman who, every time she wanted to see an owl, she'd just say to the woods, I'd like to see an owl today. And then she'd go on her walk and she'd see an owl.
Wow.
I thought I'd try that, but I didn't want an owl. I wanted antlers. I wanted to find antlers. So I said to the woods this day, I would like to see antlers today. There's no offering involved. This is just me, like, just being crazy, get out of my car, trying weird stuff. I go on my hike. I'm actually going up to the chessboard on this day, and I see something white in the tree off the trail, and I look, and I think it's somebody. A lot of times people leave their trash around. And I thought it was a plastic bag, and I bop off the trail because I clean up. I'm weird. I feel like it's my responsibility to clean the trash up in the park because I use it so much. So I'm thinking, I'm angry. I'm thinking like I'm going to have to, somebody's diaper they put in a bag, or maybe their dog excrement. You find that sometimes, or sometimes hunters will leave trash around. I'm sort of angry about it and trying to figure out who tied this bag up in a tree. And I get closer to it and I realize it's the entire tail section of a barn owl, bright white. And I had asked for antlers and I got an owl anyway that day. It was really, really strange and very odd. And it was like I said, the whole tail section wasn't a single feather. In any case, back to this day, I leave the alcohol. So having had success before, I left the alcohol and I set out to the woods like a crazy person. I would like to find a skull today. And I walked from there about 100, 200 yards maybe into the middle of this field. And there's this circle of trees that I'd never been in before. I'd hiked this park hundreds, if not 1,000 times before. And I'd never been in these trees. I thought, wow, that's neat. I'm gonna go over there. And it's almost a perfect circle of trees in the middle of this field. I walk into the trees, and there's a large stone mound in the middle of the trees. And I've referred to this as a fairy fort, and Josh spanked me and said I'm not allowed to call it a fairy fort because we don't have fairy forts in America. Mm. But were this in Ireland, it would be a fairy fort.
Like we do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm going to climb to the top of this and look around. And as I'm going up this large mound of stones, I start seeing little bits of fur and then blood. And then I get to a freshly decapitated groundhog head. I had the jaw ripped from it.
Whoa. And
it's at this point I realize I asked for a skull and I got a skull. Now, my hope was a nice clean one because I don't like gore. I'm not a fan of gore. I like these nice clean, I'm an artist. I like to draw skulls. I've been collecting my entire life. I wanted a nice, clean, sun-bleached skull. That is not what I got. This was a gory, freshly ripped off groundhog head. The jaw had been ripped from the other part of the head. It's all laying there and no body. There's no body of the groundhog. It's just the head. And it hits me. I asked for a skull 10 minutes ago, and I got a skull. And I got this really oppressive feeling, just this really just oppressive feeling. And I backed out of this circle of trees. I'm literally backing out of it, like keeping my eye on it, and sort of walking half backwards, and as I keep looking at it, I'm completely stunned at this point. And I back my way out of the field in the opposite direction from which I came, and I stopped and I realized where I was at my first chessboard, that first place I was doing the exchanges for, and where this circle of trees was at least where it sounded like I heard that would not come from that day way back when. And it was just this really, really oppressive, really sickening feeling. It wasn't a good feeling at all. I didn't like it. And I came there I stopped going there so much because it was just, like I said, it wasn't a pleasant feeling at all. But I did hike there again a couple more times, and I would check for that wine bottle. And the next time I went, it was gone. And the time I came back after that, it was there. I could see it in the hole. I couldn't reach it. And then every time since I've looked for it, it's not been in there. It's not been in the hole. So maybe I went 2 other times after that. Probably the third time after finding the groundhog skull, which I did not take, which is a big no-no. You don't ask for things when you're doing this. This is according to folklore. If you do ask for something and it's given to you, our ancestors say make damn sure you take it because you're going to offend them if you don't. And so this is on me. I made the mistake. So I was doing a podcast. I was doing OK Talk the night before the last time I went. Well, not I've been there several times since, but as far as the story goes. And we were talking about several things in the course of this podcast. One of them was just a folk story, how to catch raccoons. You put something shiny in a bottle and the raccoon will reach in, but it can't pull it out. If you put coins or something in an old jug, and you'll find him in the morning with his hand holding the shiny thing. And, that's how you catch raccoons. It's an old folk kind of country folk story. And then we talked about how when you mess with this stuff, when you mess with the other, it's like putting on the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, and it's like the great Eye of Sauron turns and looks at you, when you start messing with this. And finally, we talked about the Small Town Monsters films, which are directed by Seth Breedlove, and we actually mentioned Breedlove by name. So I go with my son this day. In fact, I got off the phone with the guy from OK Talk, Clint, because I promised my son we'd go hiking the next day. So I was like, look, I got to cut this off because, I told my son we'd go for a hike. So following day is rainy, but, it was a warm day. We decided to go anyway. And we go on this hike. And we parked at the parking lot that's actually called the Crossroads parking lot. It's at a crossroads. So the story starts at a crossroads as far as that day goes. We do our little hike, and we got to the point where we're circling back to my vehicle. And I told my son, I said, well, do you want to take like the main way back, or we can take the side trail? And he always takes the path less traveled. He likes, going more, the more, rural or wild the path, the happier he is. So we go down this path, and I see him stop. He's in much better shape than I am, so he's usually about 20 yards, if not more, ahead of me. I see him stop and straighten up at this kind of fork in the trail, and I reach up to him. I was like, "What do you see?" And he said, "I think that's a raccoon up there." And I looked, and sure enough, it was a raccoon. And he took another step towards us. I said, no, we're going to take another trail here, buddy. It shouldn't be out during the day. And he turned around, and as he did, this thing just started barreling at us, and it's hissing and growling and making all kinds of noise. And so I told him at that point, I said, run. And
raccoon is doing this?
Oh yeah. It's just snarling and hissing and just coming barreling full speed at us. Yikes. And I started running. I took one look back and I'm not outrunning this thing. This So the only thing I could do is put myself between it and my son. And when I hike, I carry, for what is all intents and purposes a wizard's staff. It's a walking stick, but it's nice and thick. If I need,
we all know what it really is.
Yeah, we know why you have it.
It's all good.
I have one of those too.
It's covered with protection symbols and so forth. But
nice.
So I just, and this is through no skill that I know of, unless I'm just inherently, great at smashing things with a walking stick. I was able to break this thing's back before it got to me. Just the first hit, I broke its back and stopped it.
You shall not pass.
Exactly.
100%.
So
100%.
After I catch up to my son, I said, my only regret is I didn't yell, "You shall not pass," as I brought my stick down on this foul beast. Well, later it hits me that we've been talking about Lord of the Rings the night before. Then
is the raccoon dead? Is he dead?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
He didn't pass.
All right.
Then it hits me.
Even for a rabid, evil raccoon, I don't want it to suffer.
Yeah.
Well, he did. It was quick.
Okay.
Then it hits me that we were talking about catching raccoons the night before. So then we go back to the Crossroads parking lot, and I've had a lot to think about this experience in the time, and there were families in the park that day. There was a woman who jogged by, like literally the same path right after, minutes after this happened. So she was in no way prepared for that. These families that were there with their kids were in no way prepared for that. If it had to happen to anybody that day, I was the person that was, kind of most prepared for this to happen, I suppose. So, I hate to say I'm glad it happened to me, but if it happened to anybody there that day, I guess it was better it happened to me. But anyway, we get back to the Crossroads parking lot, and I call the park ranger, and they say, okay, we'll send somebody out. And the ranger shows up, and you can look this up on York County Park's website. There's a ranger named Breedlove, and the name tag on the ranger is Breedlove. And I see that, and my heart just sinks. And it was it was just the most oppressive feeling. it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. And I just thought,
So you're seeing all these synchronicities.
Yeah, you're
and
steeped in the
taking
world of
them-
synchronicity. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah.
But you're seeing them as negative signs because you tracing back to the actions of like not taking that skull.
Well, because shit's going down.
Exactly. I this was me getting my butt smacked for breaking the rules of folklore. For A, for asking for things to begin with, and B, for when I was given what I was asked for not taking it. And I really feel like it all wove together. I mean, and that's just my feeling. I can't prove any of this. It's just my gut feeling as regards it. And it was very heavy, and it took me a long time before I went back there. I've been hiking there again recently, and things seem okay. But it was just not a happy time.
That's an incredible story, man.
I want this story to serve as a reminder to our listeners. Aside from all the warnings that come with this story, there is no such thing as boredom. Okay, because you can turn a day or two at the park into an adventure. All right. So, okay, maybe we shouldn't be interacting with folklore and nature this way, but isn't it so much more exciting than just being bored? I don't know. I mean, you tell me not to do this stuff, and I'm like, well, now I kind of want to go do it.
Well, again, what I will say is with gifting, like in my experience, you will get results, but I would not do food and I wouldn't ask for things. So find other things, rocks, pebbles, shiny things, whatever.
What's at stake, Tim? What's at the ultimate stake when it does, and if it does go wrong?
The other side of that is I wasn't hurt, right? I didn't get. I mean, I had to get rabies shots because I had open cuts on my legs because I was hiking in shorts and I got into thorns and stuff before. But so just for the safety aspect of it, I did have to get rabies shots. But I didn't really get attacked. I didn't get bitten. I was able to stop it. It didn't get by me or get to my son or anything. So the other aspect of it is it didn't really go horribly wrong. I think it was more of a, like I said, a smack on the ass telling me like, hey, you've done wrong here. Just talking to witnesses, I've had some witnesses who've had some horrible things happen as regards the other, whose lives have been changed, forever, and who have. I'm not a psychologist, but I can't diagnose it. But what I would assume would be PTSD from what they're telling me.
100%, yeah.
So, this stuff can go sideways, and it can go sideways quickly. So,
well, in the book, in volume 1, you guys give examples of people who started taking coolers out to areas and offering food to Bigfoot, as a gift. And then once they stop doing that, there's suddenly activity happening at their house where like stones are being thrown at them, or people's dogs turn up dead, that kind of stuff, where it's like you really are asking to engage with something that if you don't maintain that relationship, when you cut it off, they might come after you, or their friends will.
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be to people to like look at the quote unquote rules. Look what they tell you in folklore to do and not to do as regards this stuff. I think there's a reason that stuff survived. It's because it in general it works. I would be real careful. Like I said, I wouldn't do it at my house. I have no problem with I still will practice gifting, but like I said, it's not food, and I don't ask for things. And then I got some very good advice from Brother Richard, who's a monk that has appeared on Strange Familiars, who has done some very interesting work with regards to stuff, including participated in exorcisms and things like that. And his advice to me was don't get obsessed with it. And those gifts are not permanent gifts. So if you're gifted anything, that doesn't go in your collection. That goes in a pile to re-gift somewhere else at some point.
Bryce, I hope you know where that marble is, buddy.
I got some work to do tonight. Joshua, I want to bring it back to you real quick. And I know right before the break, Riley kind of asked, where does folklore turn into fact? And then to sort of go on what we're talking about, the dangerous elements, when does this stuff get nasty? And to even add to that, like, You know, what's your take on this whole missing 411 stuff?
Well, Bryce, one question at a time.
Okay.
Bryce
Well, I
hijacked
think
my
you
question
could,
to go
yeah.
to
I
missing
mean, well,
411.
okay, yeah, sure. Yeah,
No, I love you.
I'm interested
I get
in I'm interested in your take on sort of, you know, because I do think there's a phenomenon taking place in these parks and these people that go missing mysteriously. I do think there's something to it, and I don't know. I guess since we're talking about the dangerous elements of this stuff, what's your take on that, Joshua?
Well, as Tim has alluded to in the past, you know, folklore oftentimes is just a convenient way of sort of passing on quite practical knowledge. You know, the way that it's described might not be subject to literal interpretation, but the end result is like, you know, don't eat that berry. No, it's not because it's possessed by a demon, but it is poisonous. You know,
Right,
that sort of thing.
right.
That's what Tim would say, and I tend to believe it. You know, I'm not entirely sure. I go back and forth on the danger of these things, not in terms of whether or not there is danger, because there is, you know, tangible danger. It's definitely something that happens. But, you know, I'm not entirely sure how often it is malicious. Sometimes I think that whatever this other intelligence that we're dealing with, and I keep it sort of umbrellaed like that, because I do think that I do think that we're seeing a lot of the same thing reflected in these different topics. I'm not sure that if sometimes what we're seeing is not something like, you know, a kid playing with a butterfly and playing a little bit too roughly with it. Or, you know, to use another Animal Kingdom metaphor, you know, a shark. You know, the shark isn't evil. The shark doesn't hate you. But a shark is going to do what a shark is meant to do.
Right.
So, you know, I think that those are two things to sort of be wary of. I would say, you know, anyone who's interested in looking at this stuff, make sure that you're prepared to have it look back at you. Doesn't look back at me very often, knock on wood. But it happens far too often for me to say that it's not a recurring theme. As far as the missing 411 thing goes, you know, I've said a lot of times that I think that the missing 411 phenomena really is a paranormal Rorschach test.
Wow.
You know, so I realize fully the irony of me saying it's mostly, you know, fairy phenomena, because that says a lot more about me than it does about the phenomena. I will say that I think that the most consistent suite of folklore that aligns with the missing 411 stuff is indeed a lot of the fairy phenomena. But again, I don't think that the fairy phenomena was necessarily describing fairy folk. I think it was just another way to describe this other intelligence that we interface with. But, you know,
Wow.
within a lot of that, especially Western European, even though fairy folklore is worldwide, and it's strikingly consistent worldwide, a lot of that sort of Western European folklore warns against wearing the color red. It warns against, the dangers of finding yourself in a boulder field or, you know, around running water, because that's where the fairies live. It warns you, against, storms being a component of how the fairies travel. And of course, a lot of these other world entities travel. And a lot of medieval epics, the way that you would actually mark passage into the other world was through a fog or a storm or a blizzard or something. So that's entirely consistent with these people sort of lapsing out of our reality into another one. One of the things that I found most interesting was whenever someone was to encounter the Menehune, which are, roughly speaking, sort of Hawaiian analogs to the fairy folk, that you would be instructed to strip naked and plant yourself face down in the dirt.
Weird.
Which is exactly the way that a lot of people were found in the missing 411 stuff. So,
yeah.
I think that it's a pretty consistent set of markers for that phenomena. But at the same time, I don't feel comfortable saying, well, missing 411 is because of fairies. I think
Of course.
I think it's because of this other that we're dealing with. But what that other's true face is, I'm not entirely sure. My favorite. When you guys read Passport to Magonia, was it one of the newer versions with the cover with the
Yes.
alien?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's great about that cover is it's got the gray alien with like 3 masks, and one's a robot, and one's a fairy queen, and one's a demon or whatever.
Yeah, love that.
And the actual original artwork for that reveals that the gray alien itself is a hand puppet, and the actual puppeteer is off outside the frame.
Right.
And I really love the elegance of that as a metaphor. Like that kind of sums up.
That's it, man.
Exactly how I feel.
Yeah,
I knew
so
there was
what
a
do you-
reason I asked you that question. Because that's the answer I wanted. You're right. I mean, it's like, no, that's it, right? It's
That's why
like
you ask
this
questions.
phenomenon, these markers are still there. It's still happening, right? It never went away. It might have changed. It might have morphed. It might be, it might have new symptoms and signs, but man, it's still going on.
Yep.
Well, we are sadly running out of time, but before we wrap up, I want to ask you guys about this other. What is this thing? Is it a trickster? Intelligence? Is it a fifth dimensional consciousness? What is
Our
the
creator
thing?
could be anything.
What is the thing that you guys that is looking back at us when we go looking at it?
I'm going to borrow from Terence McKenna and describe it as an ecology of souls. I know that's kind of a little bit of a sidestep. I could say something about dimensions, blah, 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 but, how many angels can dance on the head of your pin?
Right.
I really don't think that actually answers the question any more accurately or any more concisely than saying that it really does have something to do with the barrier between the physical and the non-physical and the barrier between the material and the spiritual. And that's sort of where I am, and sort of one of the projects that I'm working on right now is parsing out those ideas.
Wow.
So this
Love
might
that.
all be just communication with the spirit realm.
That's actually so.
That's a fair answer. I mean, yeah.
Well, and
So,
then
yeah,
to add on to what McKenna's quote, I mean, the ecology of souls, it sort of hints at that even though it can split off into personality and into individualism, it's really like a free-flowing miasma, almost like a collective, it has its own thing going on, right? So is it really Aunt Tilly, or is Aunt Tilly just another splinter of this sort of, this ecology of collective souls,
Yeah, I mean, I think of something that I listened to one of his old interviews or one of his old lectures that really stuck with me. And he makes reference to his belief at the time, because, it's always ever changing, but his belief that the DMT functioned as sort of a bungee into the bardo. And I really like that idea, because if you look at some of these similarities, you can trace a line. That's what I'm doing right now in my work, is you can trace a line through fairies and the dead and shamanic states and burial mounds and the wild hunt and ley lines and the abduction experience, and all this stuff really does seem to sort of have at its pivot point this idea of this this phase change between souls as they enter or leave whatever this plane of existence is.
God, well, we look forward to that.
Tim, what about you? What's the other in your mind?
Well, I think ecology is a good word, because I think there's an ecosystem out there, and I think that people will tend to get wrapped up in this idea that everything is demons. When no, there's good and there's bad out there, and there's everything in between, and I think that's why that word ecology is a good one for it, because there's a lot out there, as someone who constantly, because it's my job now, constantly dealing with this, either in the form of interviewing witnesses or on my own or writing about it, etc. You hear a lot of people say, well, it's all fairies, or it's all the jinn, and that explains it, or it's all the fairies, that explains it, or it's all poltergeists, that explains it. And to them, I say, yes. Yes, it is all the jinn, and it is all the poltergeists, and it is all fairies. It's, all of the above and more. So, Josh probably said it more eloquently than I did, but I tend to agree with that idea. There's something other. I don't think it's all necessarily one thing, but there seems to be so much in common between the Bigfoot phenomena and poltergeist phenomena and alien abduction phenomena and so forth, that I can no longer personally entirely separate them.
Wow. Well, what we love about guys like you is you're helping us burrow closer to the truth, and for that we thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. God, we're going to have you guys back hopefully in the future, so we can continue this incredible conversation.
Well, we won't say goodbye quite just yet, you guys, because there's a game that we like to play with all of our guests. And I think that we should wrap up today's episode with this game because our listeners would be disappointed if we didn't play it with the two of you. I'm going to go down a list of phenomena. And if you're open to it, you're going to say, believe it, even if you're not, 100% there. If you're not open to it, you're going to say bullshit.
I'm going to
be a paranormal slut. Here we go.
This is BCC's own Rorschach test. So
this is a game that we like to call bullshit
or believe it.
All right, Josh and Tim, on your mark, get set, ghosts.
Believe it.
Believe it, but not
UFO.
necessarily the spirits of the dead.
Yes, same with Tim.
UFOs.
Believe it.
Sure, absolutely.
But not necessarily extraterrestrials.
There you go.
I think we know where this is headed.
The qualifiers around.
Yeah. And if there's anything, we can always come back to it. Bigfoot.
Believe it.
1,000% believe it, but don't think it's an undiscovered monkey.
ESP.
Believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Believe it more than anything else on this list, actually.
Well, I haven't gotten to unicorns yet.
Yeah, he already knows. He knows because ESP.
Shadow people.
Believe it.
Yeah, I've heard enough tales.
Unicorns.
Bullshit.
Josh, you notice that you're going to see a unicorn.
Yeah, I know. I am. Right.
It's going to walk up in your backyard and you're going to be like, shit.
Contain it into a corner.
Alien abductions.
Believe it.
Believe it, but I don't think you'll leave your bed.
Yeti.
But you should believe it. I mean,
Yeah,
Bigfoot.
sure. Under the Bigfoot umbrella, absolutely.
Mothman.
Believe it. Probably not a flesh and blood cryptid.
Yeah, believe it can't be a flesh and blood cryptid. Cannot be.
Out of body experiences.
Well, sure. Yeah,
Believe
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Tarot cards.
I've seen tarot cards. I know they exist. Yes.
I've been waiting for that answer and no one's done that.
Retroactive bias. That's my answer.
Demonic.
I don't know.
Have you seen Josh? Have you seen Jodorowsky? Have you seen his documentary where he does a tarot?
I have not.
Absolutely worth checking out. He says the future is shit. I do not tell the future, but he uses them as a sort of a psychological device, and it's pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, I guess that should be my qualifier. Is I think it might. I think people use a lot of it in the wrong way, but as far as it being a device to parse something objective, yeah, sure, believe it.
Demonically possessed dolls.
Oh boy. I do so many of these paranormal conventions, and so many people have their collection of haunted dolls they bring. Any poor, sad old doll that looks vaguely spooky is haunted these days.
Obviously.
I mean, I guess it could happen, but for most of these things, no, they're just dolls.
Believe it on rare occasions. How about that?
The healing power of crystals.
Ooh, bullshit ish. I mean, here's the thing. Like, if someone believes that a crystal will heal them, and they're tapping into a placebo effect, it's not the crystal, but it's their belief in the crystal. So
Bingo.
I'm gonna have to go with bullshit. From the literal interpretation, bullshit.
I'll agree 100% with what Josh said.
So Michael Star Wars figures can act as a crystal.
Yeah, man. They're those
Yeah.
crystals.
Mm-hmm.
And I put them all over my naked body when I have a fever.
Yeah. Honda Baba broke my fever.
Yeah. Walrus Man is my thermometer. An alien spacecraft crashed at Roswell.
I'm gonna go with bullshit. Actually,
Yeah, I do not believe that.
Loch Ness Monster.
believe it, not a cryptid.
Yeah, there's something there, but I don't think it's an undiscovered dinosaur or something.
Dinosaur ghost.
Atlantis.
Atlantis. Believe it. Agnostic. I can't pick agnostic, can I? I sure believe it. Why not?
Yeah, I think I believe. I mean, there was something like that. I don't know exactly what the New Age people think it was, but
Haunted houses.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think I know where this is going to go, but skunk ape,
believe it.
Hell yeah.
It's under the Bigfoot umbrella. Yes.
the Jersey Devil.
Bullshit, actually.
I put it in the same category as Mothman. I think people are seeing something, but it's not some kind of, you're not going to find a nest with Mothman eggs in it, and you're not going to find a baby Jersey Devil anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
The biblical devil.
Believe it. Yeah.
The devil's going to show up in your backyard.
I know where Tim's coming from. It's because if you take the face value of each of these, like half of them become bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So, yes, I guess. But again, I think people have strange interpretations of this stuff that's informed by, pop culture and everything else, and they don't quite get it. But sure, we'll say yes.
Speaking to the dead.
Believe it.
Yes. Believe it.
Mermaids. Or Mersquatch.
Yeah, you might want to
bring up
change that one to Mersquatch in honor of Footprints End.
Bullshit. In the way that you mean it, bullshit.
Yeah, I guess again, it's like the unicorn. Like the minute you say like, no, this one's going to visit you, but as people understand mermaids, we'll say yeah.
The government is hiding the truth about Sasquatch.
Bullshit.
1,000% bullshit. They don't know shit.
Yeah.
Past lives.
Believe it. Yeah. The work of Ian Stevenson is really compelling.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've read some interesting stuff. I'll say believe it. There's a caveat to every one of these, but yeah, just basically believe it. Sure.
Life on other planets.
Sure. If there's life here, I'm sure, and there's almost limitless number of other planets. I mean, they found life on Mars, didn't they? Didn't they find bacteria?
Yep, pretty much. Life after death.
Believe it.
Yeah.
Caveat. Yeah, it's caveat. Tim, I know.
Caveat, but yes.
I think we put an asterisk to each one of these. This is fantastic. Guys, you just passed bullshit or believe it. Great job.
I didn't know it was a pass fail. I'm glad.
Well, you got through it. That's all that really matters. But yeah, I love it. I also love when people go, well, not the way you mean it. And it's like, well, I'm just putting the word out there. I don't actually mean it necessarily in any way,
right?
But that to me is the fun of it, is unpacking what these symbolically mean to people. So
yeah, just quickly, I interviewed a guest on the podcast recently, and she was very interested in fairy lore, and she was telling me that she always told people like, the Tinkerbell type fairy is complete bullshit, and that's creation of Victorian times and blah blah blah, and lo and behold, a week after she tells people this, she's in her backyard and these weird lights come out of the woods, and inside one of these lights, she sees this little like Tinkerbell type fairy, as if to tell her like, you don't know.
Yeah,
I guess the way to see something cool is say you don't believe in it.
Who knows?
Maybe that's the key. All right, Josh, Tim, we don't really know where to find Bigfoot, but where can our listeners find you and find your books?
Where the Footprints End, both volumes are on Amazon. All of our other books, I'll go ahead and speak for Josh. All of our other books are there as well. If you look up Joshua Cutchin, or if you look up Timothy Renner, you'll get all of our books. I do have a book that's not available on Amazon. It's a book of my artwork. If you like my illustrations, it's called Apparitions, Illustrations of the Other, and that is available directly from me. All of my contact information is at strangefamiliars.com. It's where my podcast is, but any contact information for that goes right to me.
You can find me at joshuacutchin.com, JOSHUACUTCHIN.com. And as Tim said, all of my books are available on Amazon, but I am certainly, with the exception of Where the Footprints End, which is because it was printed through them, it's the only place to get it. I definitely advocate for people to go through any other sort of any other option that they have.
Indiebound.org. We're always plugging that for people, and if they help support their local bookshop during this time as well.
And I believe that you can reach out to Timothy or I for autographed copies of our books directly from us as well.
Awesome.
Fantastic. And of course, you can find us at Bigfoot Collectors Club on Instagram, at Bigfoot Pod on Twitter. Write to us with your own paranormal encounters at BigfootCollectorsClub@gmail.com. And please do us a favor, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. If you do, we might read it here on the show, just like this one that says, wow, 5 stars, such a great podcast. Michael, Riley, and Bryce are interesting and hilarious. Can't get enough. Thank you to Slocrates22 for that review. Before we say goodbye, Bryce, Riley, anything to plug?
You know what? We just entered a new promo code for my new game, Dirty Picture Cover-Up. If you type in the promo code BCCDPCU, you will get 15% off. So use that and get yours today.
Fantastic.
And I would just say we're still in the pre-sale for the new Sprinter record at alternativetentacles.com. You can pre-order it on vinyl or CD. It comes with a cool limited edition t-shirt. Alternative Tentacles is a super rad historic label, and we're really excited to be releasing with them.
I'm going to go ahead and plug Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2, even though I haven't read it yet. Definitely check out Tim and Josh's work. It's great. And gentlemen, we'll definitely have you back on the show sometime. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
We are all huge fans, truly.
What a
Absolute
treat.
pleasure. Thanks, y'all.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, listeners, we'll be back next week. Until then, good night.
And go get regressed. All right. Thank you so much, you guys. That was a treat. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. To support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple reward episodes every month.